Okay, today we are talking about solving ratios and proportions. You've done stuff with ratios and proportions before in middle school, but we're going to think about it just a little bit different than what you've done before. So before we get started, make sure you add this in your table of contents. Here's today's date. And make sure that you go ahead and put the page number. Okay. And then the learning target. This is the last new thing you're going to learn before your next test. So a ratio compares two numbers by division. And you can see it written any of those three ways. A above B, like in a fraction, A colon B, and A to B. Basically it's saying for every A I have this many B's. That being said, in math, for the most part, we're going to use a fraction so that we can do some operations and stuff with it. A proportion is just when you take the two ratios that you've set up and you set them equal to each other. Many problems require us to solve these, so make sure that you understand how to find it. So we're going to look at example 1, and we're going to set it up just like an equation. What I've always heard in the past from middle schoolers when they're coming in as freshmen is cross multiply and divide. Cross multiply and divide will work in most cases, but in some cases I'm getting ready to show you they will not. So I don't like the terms cross multiply and divide. I don't want you to memorize that. I would rather you think of cross multiply and solve. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to cross multiply and solve. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 25 times 7. And it doesn't matter which side you put this on. 25 times 7 is 175. And then 3 times x, which is 3x. Now, if I was going to solve this equation, I'm trying to get x by itself. So following my steps, I can't distribute, I can't combine like terms, all my variables are on the same side. So there's nothing else I can do but to just go ahead and solve and to try to get x by itself, which would mean that I would have to divide by 3 here. And when I divide 175 by 3, I get a fraction. Which is okay. So I can't reduce this fraction, so my answer is 175 over 3 is equal to x, or if it makes you happy to write the x on the other side, it's the same thing to say x is 175 over 3. Example 2. So same process as before. I'm going to cross multiply and solve. So let's separate the two sides of our equation. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cross multiply. And so I'm going to multiply the 25 times x, which gives me 25x. Then I'm multiplying the 30 times x plus 5. And when I write that out, I have to be careful. I have to make sure that I put parentheses around x plus 5. Because if I didn't, it would just be 30x plus 5. It would look like this. And if I didn't put this in parentheses to show that this is an entire group, then I'm only multiplying 30 times x, when in reality, cross multiplying would be multiplying 30 times this whole thing, x plus 5. So you have to put it in parentheses, so make sure that you're careful there. So this is where cross multiply and divide wouldn't work, because it doesn't make sense to divide in this case. I need to solve this equation for x. So I'm going to follow my steps like I have been. The first step would be, can I distribute? I can't do anything on this side, but here I can. So I'm going to go ahead and distribute 30. When I distribute 30, I get 30x, and 30 times 5 is 150. And then I didn't do anything with this 25x. Next step is, can I combine like terms? And I cannot, because this has an x and this does not. So the next step is make sure all my variables are on the same side, and they are not. I've got a variable on both sides. So I'm going to move one to the other. It wouldn't make any sense in this case to move the 25 to the other side, because I've already got something else on here. So I want all my x's on the same side, since I already have an x over here and only an x over here. I need to move the 30x. So I'm going to move 30x to the other side, and when I do that, I end up with 150 only on this side. And on this side, I end up with a negative 5x. So my next step would be to box my variable and solve, but there's no need to actually put a box around it because there's nothing else I can do with it. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of negative 5, so I'm going to divide by it. When I divide by it, my final answer, that goes to 1, so I'm left with x on this side. And on this side, I get a negative 30. Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. Finishing this recording at home, that was my dog. So when you're finished, you end up with x equals negative 30, and that's your final answer. Alright, last example. Again, we're just going to divide this all the way down. So I'm going to cross multiply 9 times n minus 7. So that would be times this whole thing, n minus 7. So I'm going to make sure that when I do n minus 7, I put it in parentheses. And we talked about that during order of operations, about how what's inside here needs to be in parentheses because this whole denominator is a group. Same thing going the other way. When I multiply the other side by 2, it's times the whole thing, so I have to make sure to put it in parentheses, 2, and then n minus 6. So, my first step on this is to distribute. And I can distribute on both sides, but I'm going to start with 1. So I'm going to distribute this side. 9 times n is 9n. And 9 times negative 7 is negative 63. 2 times n is 2n, and 2 times negative 6 is negative 12. So my next step would be to combine like terms. I don't have any like terms on this side or this side, so I'm done with that. The next step would be to get all of my variables on the same side. So I'm going to move 2n to the other side with 9n, and you can go the other way this time. It really doesn't matter. But I'm choosing to move 2n, so I'm going to subtract it because it was positive. That goes to 0, and the only thing left on this side is negative 12. And on this side, this gives me 7n minus 63. So now my next step would be to box my variable, and I need to move this to the other side. So in order to do that, I'm going to add 63. That goes to 0, and I'm left with 7n on this side, and on this side I get 51. Last step, divide by 7, and I'm running out of room here, but I end up getting n equals 3. Okay, so make sure that you take the time to rate the video if the question doesn't pop up. I know sometimes the question doesn't pop up, so if you rate it, then I will know that you answered it and that you watched the entire video. So that concludes our lesson for today.